Okay, we'll call this meeting of the Board of Education to order. First item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, if you'll join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Now, normally at our workshop sessions, we have public comments at the end of the meeting, the assumption being that the comments would be made on the workshop topics. I was informed by Ms. Mosby that there are about 5 students here from Pathways Academy who were not properly informed of our procedure. They wanted to address the board, didn't realize they'd have to wait to the end of the meeting. They're going to have to take buses and stuff. So with the agreement of the board, I'd ask if those students alone be allowed to address the board at the beginning of the meeting. Anybody else should comment at the regular time at the end of the meeting. Any objection? Okay. We don't have a sign up for that, but if the students want to come up, oh, you do?
Yeah.
The students are on there?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. Then I will turn it over to Mr. Barbas.
Okay, so when we have public comments, our policy is you come up to the podium and you announce your name and address, and you are each allowed to speak for 3 minutes. So the first speaker I have signed up here is Jade Freeman.
Hi, my name is Jade Freeman, and I attend Norwalk Pathways Academy, not Briggs. And I would just like to say that you're 100% wrong in your decision to close our school and pack us into 2 rooms that smell like old cars. We're not animals or criminals, and we refuse to be isolated and treated as such. Not only are you subliminally telling us that you don't care about our futures and we don't matter, but you're also stereotyping and labeling us. We're not bad kids and we won't stand for your decision. Because our school's like a family, everyone gets along. We help each other and also push each other to do more. It's not Briggs and it's not like High Road, so we don't have behavioral issues, and we're just kids in situations that our school system failed to help us resolve. You're hurting us. I'm a senior, a single teen mom, and I managed to make it on the honor roll due to the extra support from my school. If it was me that you were limiting due to your budget and greed for money, that would mean my 7-month-old son would be suffering too. The other kids, like my brother, need this smaller environment to feel heard and to know he can succeed in life, because our school provides the support that 2 classrooms won't. Our school provides a drive to have a future that 2 small rooms won't. And quite honestly, I haven't seen you go down to our school once and see the improvements that have been made since Dr. Allen started working here, let alone get to know any of us. So with all due respect, you're not qualified to label us bad kids or to decide whether we deserve your respect to hear us out. If you look at the percentage of kids that have been arrested at either Norwalk High or Brian McMahon, the percentage of kids that have been arrested versus the percentage of kids that have been arrested at our school, I'm sure you wouldn't see us as so bad. We're simply kids trying to overcome our personal obstacles in life and graduate to move on to the next level. Everyone has problems from time to time, and we're all human beings and must support one another. Mrs. Mosby, we know from your father that your sister attended Briggs and she's now a successful accountant. Mr. Eric Anderson, you also attended Briggs when you had problems too, and the Norwalk Public Schools transportation person, Joanne Zanvetter, attended Briggs. Many Norwalk Public Schools employees or people from their family have attended Briggs and went on to do great things. After we've made improvements, you honestly see us as kids that are that bad? Ask yourself, if your child or grandchild had a problem, wouldn't you want a supportive and loving environment for your family member?
Thank you. The next speaker would be Jennifer Valencia.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Valencia, and I am a current junior enrolled at MPA. I enrolled in September. My experience at MPA has been a total success. Back when I was at McMahon, I wouldn't have a decent amount of sleep. I would be so tired and it would be so difficult for me to learn. At MPA, school starts at 9:30. It gives me the opportunity to get my sleep and eat a good breakfast and arrive on time. NPA is also a great way for students to get one-on-one help. Back in McMahon and the other high schools, that wouldn't happen because there'd be so many students in one class. In NPA, you have experiences that you might not have in the other schools. We have a police academy and a fire academy, which teaches us integrity and how to work well with others. Every single student at MPA has support from each staff member and feels comfortable to talk to them for anything. Students are already saying that if breaks get shut down, they will drop out because they don't want to be in a shop all day, like they mentioned in the paper in the hour. If breaks get shut down, the dropout rate will increase, which means that is bad because we are the future. Thank you for listening, and we will continue to fight because this is not the first battle we have fought, and we will continue to fight for us because we are a family. And remember, one day we will be taking care of you, just like you're taking care of us.
Thank you. The next speaker is Omari Nash.
Hello and good evening. My name is Omari Nash. I am currently a senior at NPA. I am also the president of Student Council. I have only been attending NPA for about a year now. I must say, it's one of the best decisions I have ever made. The transfer from NHS to NPA had impacted me in a positive way. What made me leave NHS was how big and packed the school was. I never knew what it felt like to get claustrophobia until I went to Norwalk High. I also left the school because I didn't get as much one-on-one time with the teacher there. At NPA, since it's a smaller environment, I get more time with the teacher to understand and get more help, and also more clarification. Also, NPA has such a positive vibe to it because you get to know everyone there and get to build a relationship with everyone. At NHS, there's too much drama for me personally, and I didn't like it. A huge positive about NPA is the later start time. Starting at 9:30 is a huge thing because most teens don't get the amount of sleep they usually should get. So having the later start time means better sleep, and with better sleep, you're more energetic. With all respect, at the meeting last week on Thursday, one of the board members said it isn't about money. Yet it was also in the newspaper that you need $1.3 million. Furthermore, at the meeting, everything ended up with something to do with money. I've heard adults refer to my peers and I as so-called bad kids, and that simply isn't true. I ask that everyone be careful with labeling us, because I, for one, not to brag, but on January 16th, I earned a certificate of accomplishment, and if you ask me, a bad kid wouldn't get that. I am also a part of the police academy. In all honesty, I believe every student at NPA should receive praise because they are all great people. If you go through with this plan, it demonstrates that you don't care about the value of our education and keeping us where we need to be and where we feel most comfortable. Notice how I say we. I say this because we are a family, and family stands up for each other. Thank you for hearing what I have to say, and have a great evening.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ashley Simcoe.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Ashley Simcoe. I'm 17 and a proud senior at Norwalk Pathways Academy. One of the main reasons I transferred to NPA is because of my anxiety and ADHD. The smaller environment and one-on-one with teachers has been crucial to my academic success. Some kids thrive in an environment where there are more students and where they're able to be more independent throughout the day. But there are students such as myself who have special learning needs that cannot be met at a comprehensive high school. For this reason, it disappoints me to know that the solution for the budget issue in Norwalk will affect students that need the most help. being placed in 2 rooms occupying the basement of Norwalk High School, where they will spend most of their day, as opposed to having our own facility, says much about how poorly valued our education and how low expectations for us are in the eyes of those making these decisions. The Hour frequently criticizes the test scores and attendance of our students, but they fail to mention the challenges we overcome. Comparing students from the comprehensive high school in Norwalk, Stanford, and Westport is offensive to us because we are all in an alternative environment for various reasons. Therefore, there is no need to compare us to comprehensive high schools. When I read the paper this morning, I asked myself, how dare they compare our success to students who do not face the same challenges or have the same needs? I noticed many pros about the other high schools mentioned, but no cons, which seems very unrealistic. The Hour also mentioned 2 other Norwalk public schools that have scored very low. These schools were not mentioned, but why is that? Lastly, we're all gathered here tonight because the changes that are said to occur will affect us all in some way, but it will affect our students the most. I would like the decision makers to keep in mind that NPA students have the right to make the same quality education as students at the comprehensive high schools, and at the moment we are being treated as if we are being punished for the challenging backgrounds that we all face. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sofia Ornelas Ubaldo.
She's not here at the moment.
Okay. Mike Hammer.
Hello, my name is Mike Hammer, and I'm currently enrolled at NPA. I am in 10th grade. I am the vice president of the student council. I've been at NPA for a year and a half, and it has been a very positive experience for me. When I used to go to Norwalk High, I H'd all my classes for my first year and a half. Due to my disabilities, to be more clear, I have ADHD and sleeping problems, which means I don't go to sleep most nights. I like being at NPA because of the later start time, because it helps me catch up my sleep from the night. I also love that I don't have to walk up 4 flights of stairs and across a stool to get to my classes. At NPA, there's one hallway, and I'm never late to my classes. And our school is moved to Norwalk High. I would be late to my classes, especially if we ate lunch in the cafeteria and took our electives in other parts of the building. I feel like NPA is making it possible for me to graduate high school. Ingenuity is an obstacle in my path to graduate. However, if we took ingenuity out and used something different, like standard teaching or APEX, it would be easier to understand what is being taught. Ingenuity is hard and more complicated than other things. Students here at Pathways like the blended learning, but not when the technology we're using freezes. There are good things about ingenuity. For first, they can use it in different languages, and you can customize the classes for however a student wants it. But for nearly 10 weeks, ingenuity would freeze, and the majority of students were unable to complete their work. Last quarter, I was hardly able to complete my science course because it was frozen every time I tried to go on. Despite multiple complaints to the technology department and ingenuity representatives, the problems were still on. I almost failed my science class because of this problem. Finally, the problem is resolved, but ingenuity is still causing a lot of problems for the students at our school. In first grade, when your teacher told you to treat others the way you want to be treated, I don't think that you would want to be on a computer for 7 hours a day and then find out your school is being moved to a basement. We are the future of this country, and one day we will be taking care of you as you are supposed to be taking care of us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jason Marroquin.
Good evening. My name is Jason Marroquin, and I'm a senior currently attending Norwalk Pathways Academy. We know that the superintendent and board want to move NPA to the automotive shop at Norwalk High School. I attended the parent meeting last Thursday, March 2nd at Norwalk High with a few of my friends here who also attend NPA. We wanted to hear what the district and parents thought and what decisions were being made about our future in the Norwalk School District. It seems like every other...
Excuse me a second. Can we have quiet in the audience so the speaker can speak uninterrupted, please? Thank you. Go ahead. Please proceed. Your daughter suggested letting them speak, John. Well, good. You file another complaint. You're good at that. Okay, please proceed.
If he wants to leave, he's welcome to leave.
Go ahead.
It seems like every other year we are told that we may close and be moved. This has been tried before, and squeezing our school into Norwalk High School did not work. What happened to learning from past mistakes or research? Cramming 60 to 100 students into 2 rooms, no matter how large they are, would leave up to 50 kids in each classroom. That sounds ridiculous to me. Some kids left their home school looking for a different environment, smaller classes, less students, more one-on-one help with the lessons, especially for students like me with ADD or ADHD. I can't function in a large, chaotic, noisy environment. MPA is quiet and calm, and I am finding success for the first time. We know that you want to shut down the school because of money. How much will it cost to renovate the auto body shop for us? I attended Norwalk High School and was a CD student with a disability. Now I'm at Pathways, and I'm successful, feel supported, and finally have an opportunity to finish high school and walk our graduation with my homeschooling friends. I could not have had this opportunity to finish on time and feel success without Pathways. I would also like you to know that at the meeting last Thursday on March 2nd, while one of my friends was speaking and asking questions, we all felt that the Chief of School Operations, Frank Costanzo, didn't really care or wasn't interested in what we were saying. In fact, towards the end of the meeting, my friend was speaking and Frank Costanzo was shaking hands and saying goodbye to people and leaving the building. This was very rude, unprofessional, and disrespectful toward us. This is a man who is in high position and showed that he does not care about our education or how we felt. He, along with some of you, only care about money. We get that the district is having financial problems, but please find the funds another way and not through us. We and those that come after us deserve better. If you want the building, that is fine, but find another school for us that is not within a large school. Please hear our voices. I'm joining the Army in June, and please remember, I will be protecting you and our country. Right now, it is your turn to protect us. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Josh Lehman.
Hello, my name is Joshua Lehman. I'm 17 years old and I'm at Norwalk Pathway Academies, not Briggs. I chose to be at this school. None of us are bad students. We are very good kids. And honestly, on a psychological level, I don't think that everybody could be shoved into the same environment in order to work on the same thing 24/7. Sure, we can customize it the way that we so wish, but it's not very easy in order to learn it without being able to interact with the teachers. And also with the teachers that we do have, they're not able to talk to everybody in the classroom due to it taking more time than a traditional high school. And also, Ingenuity is not helping our cause because they have not been working for an estimated 10 weeks now, and it keeps crashing, freezing, and not letting us do anything. I don't think that's very fair in order to attack everybody at the school, as well as some of my other students here that have also said that most of you have not gone to our school in order to actually see the improvement for yourselves. And for a lot of other mental reasons, I don't think it's fair in order to attack everybody because they chose to be in this environment than the traditional high school, but now we're getting shoved into the other high school for unfair reasons. We will be the outcast of those schools. Basically, what will happen is that we're going to be sitting down there and all the other students are going to try and come to us after school and make fun of us and attack our families for it. And they're just going to see us as this just outcast. And if one thing happens between our schools, we're going to be the cause for it, apparently, even if the other students started. I don't think that's honestly any fair. Oh, fair. And also, I don't think it's fair for the government in order to be attacking all the students in order to gain money for yourselves. When it comes to all these other reasons psychologically, I don't think it's fair to attack everybody in class. Everybody is bad. I'd see it more fair if you went to the school and talked to everybody yourselves to see how it's a whole variety of students. Most of the students at the school aren't bad. Actually, in fact, none of them are. A lot of them are very nice individuals and we all get along like a family. We all care for each other, we all help each other, and the teachers that actually care for us instead of just a paycheck like in the traditional high schools that don't actually help us. Because in McMahon, I'm not going to say his name, but my old math teacher, he constantly had me come after class and always attacked me when I was the quietest student in the classroom. And he gave me a packet, walked away, and started working on his email, but then helped everybody else in the room except for me. He treated me like an outcast when I was actually trying to do my work. And he would never actually tell everybody how to do it properly. If one person actually understood it, like in most high schools, because they just care about a paycheck, one person will understand it, then they go to the next topic and leave everybody else behind, and then everybody else gets attacked for it, which I don't see that as fair. Thank you for listening to me, and thank you for having my time.
I believe our last speaker is Mr. Lehman.
Sorry, I didn't have a lot of time to prepare. Obviously, I'm not a student, if you've noticed by the gray hair, but I am a Yonkers, New York transplant, and I came to Connecticut for two reasons. One was to start a business in Stamford, and I've had a 20-year computer business there, very successful one. The other one is because when my oldest son was 5, he came home from kindergarten telling me that he could not wear a certain color to school for Halloween because the gangs were going to stab him at 5 years old. Okay, so I needed to move my family out of that environment to come up here. Up here was much nicer, everyone was much nicer. We were met personally by the principals when our kids were let into the schools, and everything worked well for the first number of years when we were in Stamford. After a while, the Stamford schools starting attacking the children, and their education was suffering, and I had to move them from Stamford to Norwalk in order to get them a better education. And again, our reception was very gracious, and they met us and they adapted to us and they learned our children and how they looked, how they worked and how they thought, and they really cared for the kids until they went to high school. So this was in grade school and middle school, and they were fine and they would help the kids out. But in high school, it became much more of a free-for-all. You're on your own kind of scenario. And it was very reminiscent because I lived this growing up. It was a survival instinct from New York, so I recognized it immediately. And I did a little bit of research before I came here. I wasn't as prepared as these kids who I think are incredibly brave for some of the issues that they themselves have to come up here and speak to you in public. You have two high schools here, one with 1,539 students, one with 1,679 students. Behind us is a very small representation of 90 students who have certain needs to have more of a one-on-one scenario so that they can learn. And I just looked up a few things on the web. Norwalk High School has a 14% proficiency in math, according to U.S. News and World Report. Brian McMahon has a 17% proficiency in math. This is nationwide. In those two high schools, they have a 14-to-1 student-teacher ratio. In this school, they have a 7-to-1 teacher ratio. So you have an environment that is basically damaging to certain children that cannot learn in that chaos and in that noise, and in an environment where, and I've heard the stories from my own kids in the school system that the teachers would explain something on the board, you would raise your hand, they would refuse to answer your question. And then you were supposed to go home and do homework on something that they didn't even teach that day. And then you would take a test the next day on something else that they didn't teach at all year long. And they just expect you to know it. Whereas in this school, it was very different. My child was catered to, my child was taught to his disabilities and his learning capabilities, and he brings home report cards, which are all A's and B's, except for one item in each class. And this is the computer item, that they're teaching them on a computer system that cannot work. So in every single class, there's A's and B's in all the tests and all the quizzes, and there's this one F averaged into every single class. And you wonder why you get the numbers on these reports. So I plead to you to please not think of this as a mathematical problem. This is much more of a psychological problem.
We have a limited 3 minutes of comments.
I'm sorry.
You've come up to
I was
that.
not prepared. So, I think it is not right for you to shove into a basement into an environment that they needed to leave in order to learn, because if you do, otherwise you need to change the name on this room.
Thank you. And that will conclude our public comments on Briggs. There'll be some public comments thereafter.
And Mr. Lyons, I have a comment, an NPA comment on one of this. I was wondering if I could make it now for continuity, Robin Keller.
Sure.
Thank you. My name is Robin Keller. I'm a Norwalk resident and a practicing special ed attorney here in Norwalk. 50% of my practice is devoted to representing on a sliding scale or a pro bono basis the underserved children of Norwalk. Many of these children over the past 5 years have been enrolled in the alternative high school, known as Briggs or NPA. Some, as you have heard, transitionally for a short period of time, and others for the majority of their academic career. Because of my experience and observations, I stand before you in opposition of relocating the alternative education program to the basement of Norwalk High School because of the dire social and emotional effects such a move would have on the alt-ed kids. It is absolutely counterintuitive to have these children that left Norwalk High School, or Brian McMahon, who needed an alternative setting, to have them return to the same location to now use the basement entrance for an isolated program. Many of the students attending Briggs are the most vulnerable of our high school population. Many have been subjected to bullying and sexual harassment in the regular education environment. Alternative education is defined by statute as a program offered to students in a non-traditional education setting that addresses, God bless you, that addresses the social, emotional, behavior, and academic needs of such students. By design, alternative education settings are those where the student, unable to face the challenges of being on the school grounds, not just the school building, but the school grounds of a traditional school, feel safe and available for learning. The Board of Ed also needs to be made aware that Norwalk has been and continues to be negligent in compliance with statutory law. I speak specifically of Public Act 15133. Norwalk has failed to provide oversight that the exact same level of support and related services that are available to regular education students is available to alternative education students. Examples of where disparity currently exists include, these are just some of them, some of the cuts that have been made to NPA or Briggs over the past 2 years that personally I am aware of through my representation of students. There is no, you gotta let me talk. There is no full-time psychologist that has been cut from Briggs. There is no full-time nurse. There is no full-time education teacher. There is no full-time art teacher. The only way these students take electives are online. That is not the same equality as the regular ed students have. There was a one full-time special ed teacher. That has been cut to half a position. That in turn has led to non-IEP compliance, that the students are not receiving the services that are on their IEP. The full-time teachers, even they have been reduced from 6 positions down to 4. If a physical move is made to Briggs, I encourage the Board of Ed, if a physical move is to be made from Briggs, I encourage the Board of Ed to investigate a location where these students can feel safe and emotionally present for learning. I also encourage the board, having been given public notice through my testimony, to immediately reinstate those staff positions cut, causing inequality to alternative ed students. Thank you very much.
That concludes our comments, and we will now move to our special recognition.
Excuse me, can I just add something? Even with all the budget cuts that you've put our school through and limited us to just working on the computer all day, we're still willing to fight for our school, and I think that says a lot, because if it was Norwalk High, honestly, I would just say close it, shut it down, I don't care, send me somewhere else. But I haven't seen kids act this united anywhere else, any other school I've been. I haven't met any other people like I have at my school. And I just would really like you not to send us to a basement and shut us in a room where no one cares.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, now we will return to the regular items on the agenda. Special recognition, middle school Read 180 and Math 180 teachers for significant mid-year gains.
So I'm going to introduce Dr. Connor, who is going to walk you through several aspects of the presentation tonight. And this is, I'm sorry we began on a negative note for a proposal that has not been made. But in any event, this is a positive night for our school district, and particularly at the middle school level. We're going to be reviewing some of the initial results of the redesign in the 6th grade, recognizing some of the educators that are most responsible for that, and then talking about next steps. And the board will recall that, phase 1 of middle school redesign came to you quite late last year, right? And there was criticism. There wasn't enough time. There wasn't enough time for professional development, for planning, and so on. Nonetheless, we've had a remarkable experience so far, and this year we are 2 months ahead of time. So we'll have lots of time for consultation, for working out the details, but have a very strong conceptual framework for moving forward, which Dr. Connor and staff will be sharing with you this evening. Michael.
Thank you, Dr. Adamowski, and thank you, Board of Education. First, I would like to highlight our practitioners that have delivered the Read 180, Math 180, and System 44 intervention. All of our middle schools have experienced exponential gains. The initial implementation of our intervention model has proven some success within the first 20 weeks of school, and this is not possible without our dedicated teachers or interventionists from all 4 of our middle schools. So I would like to call them up individually to receive your recognition. Bernadette White.
When you come up, could you start on that end and receive the congratulations of the board?
Miss Jenny Seeley.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Come see us anytime. Please come visit. Thank you.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
Absolutely, great job.
Thank you.
Miss Tricia Ortiz.
Good job. Thanks for you. Congratulations, Tricia.
Miss Shannon Mariconda.
Work. It's for you. Congratulations, Shannon.
Thank you.
Miss Amy DeScella. Ms. DeScella also serves on the middle school redesign committee.
Work. It's for you. Congratulations, Amy.
Mr. Tim Heffernan.
Mr. Heffernan is also the wrestling coach at Brian McMahon High School. No, I'm sorry.
No, it's Coach Jackson. Where's Coach Jackson? Let's go, Coach Jackson.
You're the baseball. Good job. Thank you, Tim. How are you?
Yeah, well done.
Last but not least.
And Mr. Lewis Jackson.
There he is.
Mark Jackson.
No, what's Lewis on there? Mike?
It's you.
I think his real name's Mark.
Do we have the right name here? Coach Mark Jackson.
Good job. We renamed you here, but you can keep Mark.
Thanks, Coach.
Another round of applause for our interventionists. And there is a lot to celebrate, and as we review phase one of the middle grades design and improvement initiative implementation, as well as making recommendations to the Board of Education for phase two. But before we get started, I also would like to thank our partners from HMH, Dr. David Bain, who's our national psychometrician, who will be sharing data with you, Ms. Liz Price, Ms. Nicole Jackson, and Ms. Audrey Dandruff. Would you please stand up and thank you for helping us with this implementation? And also from the Center for Secondary School Redesign, who helped the design elements from Brian McMahon High School and Norwalk High School as well, for continuity purposes, as well as the work that they have conducted in Norwalk with both of our high schools. It was only that we have the CSSR provide that support. So Mr. Joe DiMartino, Mr. Mike Nass, and Mr. Tony Fierro, who is here for support. And of course, our internal NPS practitioners and leaders that are here, our principals, as well as Ms. Janine Goss, Mr. Craig Kreller, Ms. Diane Filardo, who has been instrumental within this process as well. Thank you. So as a recap for phase one, the architectural construct of the Middle Grades Design and Improvement Initiative is underscored by three conceptual frameworks. One, the ecosystem of student-driven learning with the focus on the antecedents of student agency as well as inquiry. The second conceptual framework that grounded our work is the DSI framework, focusing on organizational leadership, how to organize and align structures and systems within our design process, instructional leadership, so we build professional capital around instructional instructional leadership to lead teachers, and then of course teaching and learning the most important aspect of this framework. And then also the Read 180, Math 180, and System 44 is grounded on the rigor and relevance framework from Quad A all the way to Quad D. Ultimately, we want to reach Quad D, which is career as well as college ready. Our central strategy comes from the James Madison University study, and the James Madison University study articulates the major school factors or the effect factors for influence and achievement at the middle school level. So Norwalk Public Schools' central strategy was opportunity to learn, which has an average of 2.5 years of growth, and then also how we maximize and utilize time in an efficient manner, which presents a 1.5 year growth. So our central strategy within this design initiative was predicated and grounded on opportunity to learn and time. You probably heard us use that phrase. We want to create more opportunities to learn and how we're able to maximize time to raise student achievement. The initial implementation within phase 1, we're going to have a really in-depth, comprehensive data review provided by Ms. Diane Floro and also Dr. David Bain, who flew in to Norwalk to present this data, because it's an outlier, borderline anomaly in a positive way, the influence or the achievement that we achieved. But the design elements correlating to the strategy of opportunity to learn and time focused on A, for 6th grade extended learning time in grade 6, inquiry-based practices that have been supported by the Center for Secondary School Redesign. That's the opportunity to learn strategy. Teach to One personalized math model at Nathan Hale, which Dr. Sacchi is going to speak briefly about. He can speak all day about TTO, but he'll briefly inform you about that, which he will be highlighted at the end of the month in Ed Week for the implementation of TTO. That is an opportunity to learn as well as a time strategy, and then also structural supports in all middle schools. Read 180, Math 180, and System 44. So I gave you the broad conceptual view of the groundwork of the middle grades design initiative, and then now we're actually going to get to the practical aspect of it. So we're going to have an initial data review from Diane Floro as well as Dr. Bain.
Mike and the other presenters, would you just, if you're going to be on a particular slide, would you just mention the number so the board can keep up with you? And I think I just want to clarify for the board, you had a lot of discussion last year about Tier 2 supports in SRBI. Well, these programs, Read 180, Math 180, System 4, these are the Tier 2 supports that were lacking in our system previously, and are now being implemented by the teachers who were recognized tonight and are producing the results you're about to hear.
I'm very happy to be here tonight to review the results of measures of academic progress for our middle schools. Measure of academic progress, MAP, we had our implementation district-wide this year in grades 3 through 10, and we are testing in mathematics, reading, and language usage. And tonight we're going to hear about how that data is used to inform teaching and learning, and particularly for our middle schools. Results from MAP are reported on a Roche unit scale. This is an equal interval scale, and this scale makes it possible to follow students' growth from one year to the next. The purpose of MAP is to establish a student's instructional level. It's a computer adaptive test. I mean, we hear about Smarter Balance being a computer adaptive test, but essentially it's a grade level test where 90% of the questions are on grade level, and in some cases for struggling students it might go one grade level below, and for high achieving students it may be higher. But MAP is different. The data bank of questions is available, the entire bank, to all students. So it really gives teachers a roadmap for our very high achieving students as well as our struggling students. The RIT score is tied into a tool called the Learning Continuum, and teachers can depending upon what they're teaching, what Common Core standard they're focusing on, they can see the learning statements, what a student is ready to learn. Often RIT is referred to as what students are ready to learn today. The beauty of NWEA and MAP is that they do frequent norming studies. The last norming study was done in 2015, and it involved 1 million students across the United States in 49 states. And what we focus on is the results, the status norms. That means what is typical achievement at grade levels, and growth norms. How do students grow? And the MAP system provides projections, growth projections, for every student every time they take a test. So once the baseline was established in the fall, based upon the results of a student, they're given a projected score that, based upon the norming study, they should be reaching. Also, the system provides grade level percentiles, and this really brings context to that scale, because that scale is really not tied into a particular grade, but the grade level percentiles are. So a percentile can be used to compare how our students are doing compared to other students across the United States in the norming study. And throughout this presentation, we'll be talking about how MAP data is being used in the district. And right now, we're really going to be focusing, when we're looking at the actual results, on how students are growing. This first chart is for reading, and we're looking at grades 6, 7, and 8, and we're focusing on the movement of the average district RIT score, which you see here, from fall to winter at each of the grade levels. And below, where we say norm, this is the typical RIT results, fall and winter, for these grade levels. Graphically, what you're looking at is typical achievement. Typical achievement means achievement at the 50th percentile. We see fall and winter, even though these bar graphs are higher, the expectation as students are going through the grades that typical performance or achievement increases. By comparison, we see the blue bar graphs that are Norwalk's achievement, fall and winter for grade 6, 7, and 8. And what do you notice? You see that in grade 6, fall and winter, Norwalk's results is below typical performance or the norm nationally. But we see that the graphs, the bar graphs in the winter is much higher and really approaching the norm. Actually, our results in the fall in grade 6 were at the 37th percentile, in the winter at the 44th. So that gap between typical achievement is closing. You can see that same pattern where we were slightly below in grade 7 in the fall, but in the winter, 20 weeks of instruction, we were at the 54th percentile. So we slightly exceeded typical growth. Fall of grade 8 in reading, we matched the norm at the 50th percentile. Now there's been a huge bump up to the 66th percentile. So we are on our way. When we talk about typical growth and we think about high stakes assessments, we look for students to be in the 60th or above percentile to be where we want them on Smarter Balance in that proficiency range. So we need to keep that in mind. Typical performance is just that, the average performance. But for our children to succeed and have high expectations, we want them beyond that. Now this is the same graph, but now we're looking at math. Although in every case, now we're looking at the winter, we're still below the 50th percentile, you can see that clearly here the gap is closing. Look at grade 8. We're at the 44th percentile, yet when students were tested in the fall, they were just at the 32nd percentile. Now, that was looking at the results of all students that were tested in the fall and all that were tested in the spring. Now we're looking at growth, and this is growth in terms of RIT points for students that had matched scores. All the students, when we're measuring growth, had MAP scores both in the fall and in the spring. And in reading, we see reading and math. Projected growth is what's expected based upon typical growth throughout the U.S. You can see in every case, we really have much higher growth. In this, it's almost more than double. And you can see that really in every case, grades 6 through 8 in reading, 6 through 8 in math, our growth, which we're highlighting tonight, far exceeded the expected growth. If that happens, then your percentile will go up. If you stay at the typical growth or projected growth, your percentile stays the same. In order for that growth to occur, many students would need to exceed the growth projections provided by NWEA. As an example, you're looking at 69% of students meeting or exceeding those projected growth at grade 8 in math and 68% in reading. And likewise in grade 7 and grade 6, you see well over that 50th percent of students reaching the projected growth. So as a result of those accelerated gains, we had higher percentiles in the winter as compared to the fall. Now, the NWEA looks at grade level reports. There are a lot of percentiles, so they band them together with the descriptor. Low achievement is less than the 21st percentile. Low average is 21 to the 40th, average 41 to 60, high average 61 to 80, and high over the 80th percentile. Clearly, anything that's in green or blue is average or above. And clearly, that's our first step. That's where we want our students to be. When we compare this distribution bands of percentiles based on MAP, fall to winter, regardless of what grade we look at, we see an increase in the percent of students falling into the higher bands. 64% in grade 6, 68% in comparison to 58% in the fall, 73% in that high band compared to 64% in the fall. So the distribution of where we want students to be is moving, and moving at a very quick pace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diane. While Dr. Bain is coming up, I just want to emphasize with the board that this issue of actual growth over projected growth is critical, because this is how the gap is closed, right? If your actual growth is higher than what you're actually projected to grow on, that is an indicator of effective teaching, of effective schooling, and it's how the achievement gap is closed. Now, specific to that is Dr. Bain's report, because these are our students who need the most support, students who are receiving the Tier 2 interventions of Read 180, Math 180, Systems 44, and it's really their progress that has to be the most accelerated in order for them to close what is probably the largest gap. And you recall, particularly in grade 6, the learning loss between 5th and 6th was historically unbelievable. And again, this is what we're trying to turn around. This is what the people tonight who were recognized have done such a good job on, and this is what your investment in the Tier 2 supports, you know, can produce in terms of student outcomes.
Okay, just want to acknowledge two more teachers that came in. Danita Coverson.
Hey, Danita, we have a gift for you that Brenda will give you, okay?
And Mary Lou Dolan.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Board President Lyons, Superintendent Adamowski. Thank you very much for allowing us to come and partner with you and to take a look at your data. First, I want to applaud you. I'm in board meetings, you know, multiple times a week, and it's refreshing to see boards take the time to recognize the teachers who teach some of our most at-risk kids. And, you know, it really speaks to your values, and appreciate so much allowing us to be a part of that. I came to Norwalk approximately 6 months ago for the first time. And the only data we had available to us at the time was your Smarter Balance data. I have a few slides right at the beginning that aren't a part of any of your decks. I'll refer to your decks in just a moment. When we looked at your Smarter Balance spring data, we realized there was the vast majority of kids were not meeting proficiency on grade level assessments, and that demographics were strong predictors of outcomes. When we dove deeper into that data, we saw that proficiency standards actually were increasing over time. And so as kids reached the middle school, we saw more and more students less than proficient. This is not uncommon in urban districts across this country. This is a challenge that many districts are facing. And we were brought in as partners to try to think about what are some outcomes or what are ways to support or turn this challenge. We looked at different schools, elementary schools, we identified each of the challenges, and we recognized that many of the middle schools, some of the challenges were profound. Ponus Ridge, West Rocks, 70–80% of students were now reaching less than proficient levels. Our first work in the district was partnering with Dr. Connor and his team to make database decisions about who would benefit from interventions and who would not. Our premise was we wanted kids to benefit from core programming if possible, but only identify students that were absolutely at need for intervention and then make sure the intervention matched their needs. This was done with multiple data sources, and every student at every middle school in 9th grade was placed with multiple data points. The RI, PI assessments that we produce, NWA map that's produced by NWA obviously, and your state level test to triangulate the data to place each student in a specific intervention. We measured this with hopes of trying to quantify movement towards smarter balance. There has been significant work in Connecticut linking our interventions and Lexile scores and quantile scores to proficiency on smarter balance. So we wanted to measure ourselves in a relation so that impact could eventually be seen within smarter balance. And this was done by linking quantile Lexile scores, which is the system which is based the movement in our interventions, to eventually the correlation to smarter balance success. We're going to start our first look looking at Math 180, which was the math intervention that was implemented at the middle schools. As Diane suggested, after 6 months, we first take a look at a third-party data source for the kids in this intervention. And we saw that in every case, students were dramatically outperforming their expected growth. As you heard, your NWA growth, your movement that kids were doing was substantially more at every grade level and at every site than what was predicted based upon the demographics and level of students you were serving. We saw this and we broke it down by each school, and the same results were consistent. The top of the blue lines are where your students were performing. The orange dots are where they would be projected to be performing if they were performing like other students that were similarly struggling anywhere else across the United States. We then took our data, and now we are on slide 10 of the Math 180 decks. So it's our first time we're going to reference just the highlights of these different decks. Slide 10 shows where your students originally placed, where they were as far as their original placement, and after 20 weeks, how many moved up. 56% moved up significant quantile buckets, moving themselves closer to proficiency, some students actually moving into ranges that are associated with proficiency on SBAC. We saw this both with our Math 180, this is slide 7, and our Math 180 Course 2 students. Significant movement from lower quantile bands or lower quantile bands to higher bands. Slide 12 in the math deck gives us a visual of this movement. The gray bars are where your students began. The blue bars are where they are now. We are breaking this as far as where they were as from the lowest achieving students to the highest achieving students. The vertical axis on the right is where they are with relation to grade level. So what we see is that our students are still performing substantially under middle school grade levels that we would typically associate with grades 6, 7, and 8. But the movement towards those grade levels is dramatic. So although they are still quite a distance from reaching or attaining grade level status, their movement towards that grade level status is significant. And when I mean significant, we talk about, we work in schools across the country, and we rarely see results like this. We have not seen these kind of results in growth anywhere in any of our partner districts in the state of Connecticut as far as movement and growth. There were incredible challenges for the level of students at their current academic levels that were being serviced in this middle school intervention model, but their movement towards grade level as measured by both our internal assessments and by the third-party NWA MAP assessments were dramatic and significantly beyond what we would have expected. Yes.
So is this data indicating that of these 5th grade students, none of them are at 5th grade level and some of them are as low as whatever?
Yeah, so we're servicing
below 3rd grade level.
We're servicing students that are at kindergarten level up to about 4th grade level. When we were working on our identification process.
Just to clarify, these are not all the students.
Right.
The students
we're only talking intervention students.
That qualified for Math 180.
So
these are the students that need the Tier 2 support.
Exactly right. Our prerequisite rule of thumb as far as placing students in intervention was that they were 2 or more full grade levels below grade level. So that means a 6th grader operating under the 4th grade level. Our goal is to move them close to grade level so your core curriculum can support them on. And so if they were very close to grade level, they wouldn't have been selected for these interventions. Thank you. That's a great question. We're going to shift to the Read 180 Universal data, which is the black and white deck. And our first slide we're going to look at is actually slide 10 in this deck. And this deck, again, shows correlations of Lexile to proficiency on Connecticut's Smarter Balance Assessment. Through numerous research studies, students of over 925 Lexiles on 6th grade often are proficient and score proficiency on Smarter Balance. The challenge is oftentimes we're servicing kids that are 300 or 400 Lexile points under that benchmark. Similarly, 970 for 7th graders and slightly over 1,000 for 8th graders in order to meet proficiency. Our identification of these students were 2 grade levels below to be serviced. Our goal was to bridge them and move them as close to grade level so that they could show grade level proficiency within 1 to 2 years. Again, we used a database system to target students and place them in one of 2 programs. The first one is Read 180 Universal, which was for students that were reading at the 3rd and 4th and 5th grade levels, and for another program called System 44, where students were reading under the 2nd grade level at middle schools. We placed these students by Lexile and used the same database system. You'll see this in the Read 180 deck, slide number 4. And then we measured growth. We have a system that's analogous to NWA with a 600,000 student norming study. Of the students that were enrolled in Read 180 Universal, we saw that 80% met Lexile gains. The most dramatic result on this page is that 65% of the students, 2/3 of your most struggling students, met end-of-year growth goals by January. This is where we would have expected them to be by the end of the year. 2/3 met that mark by January. 45% of your intervention students in Read 180, 45%, 1 and 2, doubled their growth expectation goal. Why that's dramatic is you're comparing your growth of your most struggling students to other struggling students across the country. We're comparing your struggling students to other struggling students, your top to other schools' tops. We would have expected your students to get 1 year's of growth at the end of the year. Half got double years growth by January. 38% of the intervention students moved into Lexiles that are correlated to higher levels associated with smarter balance assessments. The movement of these very, very struggling students was dramatic. We looked at this by each school site. Each school site, and I am on slide 6, I believe. 6, yes, of your deck. Every school, based upon the population of students that they serve, is given a projected normative growth for end of year. For example, the Ponus Ridge Middle School students would be expected, based upon national norming studies, to grow 67 Lexile points by the end of the year. These reading intervention students have grown 112, almost a double for the entire cohort. We see this across the board, even when you look at Norwalk High School, which gives the appearance of being the lowest achieving. If you think about this from a different point of view, by the middle of the year, they had already exceeded their end-of-year growth. The growth that we're seeing at school sites like Poton Ridge and Roten Middle School is extraordinary and not typically seen. Where this was verified was by looking at your third-party NWA map data, which showed the exact same results, the exact same types of dramatic results with these groups of students. Yes?
What would account, I mean, especially for this, I mean, I'm a mathematician, I mean, these numbers look crazy.
They do look crazy.
For Roten, what would account for that, and have you ever seen anything like that in other districts you've worked in?
I've never seen this level growth at this time in the year, no. And not across all sites, and not in a new intervention. So I think there's a lot of secret sauce that is happening here as I've gotten to know your team. Number one, there was a great deal of effort into placement. Students were targeted very, very specifically to interventions that targeted their actual skill deficits. That was a big hurdle. Oftentimes districts, they only target a small population of their kids, or they try to spend most of the time still doing grade level like work. These students are 4 and 5 years below grade level. They needed work at their instructional level. They needed work targeting at times 3rd, 4th, 5th grade standards, even though they were in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. We saw that work. We also saw some amazing teaching. We saw some teachers just have dramatic impact. One of the things we monitor along the way is how on model schools are. At every one of your sites, you were significantly on model. Oftentimes districts, they put in interventions, but they do not invest in professional development for their teachers. They think just give them a box and let's see what the outcomes are. You as a school board, it's clear, invested heavily in professional training for the teachers, and there was incredible outcome. You even brought on a project manager to support these teachers on a daily basis. So I think they received incredible support, both from within your organization and externally, to be successful. And oftentimes teachers are not given that incredible level of support.
So quality teachers, kids identified properly, good PD.
And just obviously implementing these interventions. These interventions were based on large-scale university research studies. There's lots of thinking work behind them, but oftentimes they get mutated when they're placed in districts. I think your district showed a real commitment to putting the interventions in on model in order to get the best results possible. And you're right, the results are dramatic. And I too would have been very skeptical if map data didn't support them along the way. It was more confirming knowing that you had a third-party assessment telling the same story of this kind of dramatic growth.
I'm assuming you'll touch on later the sustainability of these trends.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Again, I wanted to bring in another map slide. I will tell you that in probably my last 50 board presentations, I haven't brought in one of our competitors' assessment data as much as I've brought in tonight, but I did so because I wanted to, again, reiterate that we're not seeing this growth just with our assessments. The yellow dots there in the middle of each of these blue blocks are where MAP would have expected West Rocks to be, for example. The blue is where the growth was. Each case, each grade level, 2 and 3 times beyond what NWA suggests is normative growth for this population of students. We're going to shift to System 44, which is our most intensive intervention. Oftentimes it's hard to believe that System 44 is needed in our schools. When we look at placement of these students, the vast majority of these students have Lexile levels under 400 Lexiles. This is equivalent to a first grade reader. As another way to look at this, of all of your System 44 students across all of your sites, this reading passage would be at the top or significantly above their reading level. If they can read a passage like this, we believe that they're a Read 180 student. Oftentimes, these students are subdivided into kids that do not have letter sound awareness to actually form words. They don't know the basic agreements of how our letters work to form words. When we can get them to read at this level, we move them on to Read 180. When we see our System 44 students, this is the level students or below that we're working with. When we looked at these students, 83% had improved accuracy. That means accuracy at letter sounds and basic letter names. 50% had increased their fluency. That means they had started to be able to read and link words together. And 24%, the third green bar, and I am on slide 5 of your System 44 deck, considered to be advancing decoders. Why that's significant is because that is a level which we equate to being able to exit this intervention. Right? We want to use System 44 as an intervention to bring kids to Read 180. We want to use Read 180 as an intervention to bring kids close to grade level, and we want to exit them as soon as possible, as soon as we think they can be supported without the intervention. We see 70% of our kids improving Lexile, and 40% of these kids already meeting end-of-year annual growth goals. And again, these are kindergarten, first grade readers that are sitting in the middle school. These are students that typically become dropouts, become disenfranchised with our educational setting because they cannot access the text, they cannot read, and our teachers really don't typically have the supports to assist them. If I was going to summarize my results of what I see here, I see intervention students in all 3 programs on pace to meet double normative growth in both literacy and math at every grade and at every school. That is really an unheard of outcome for our work, and I applaud you and your team for being able to reach those outcomes. The math intervention students in Math 180 averaged growing more than a full grade level in the first semester. If you imagine the impact of that, if you are a 7th grade student and you're doing math at the 3rd grade level, which is what the typical student is doing, they've always only grown about a half a year in a year's time. These students as a cohort grew more than a year in a half a year's time. This is exactly opposite what we would typically see them do. In reading intervention, 65% met end-of-year growth goals, with 45% doubling that goal. And all 4 middle school sites and Norwalk High School are on pace to double expected growth for their intervention cohorts. This will bring a tremendous number of students to being able to access grade level curriculum in the next 1 to 2 years. Thank you very much.
Dr. Bean, I know you traveled a distance to be here tonight, and thank you very much for your work and for your support.
Could you address the sustainability issue, though?
I think number one, I think that our goal is to have less intervention students every year. So one of the things we don't want to sustain is the number of kids you have to support in intervention. So if there's one thing that I hope we see in the next 2 to 3 years is significantly less students in intervention. That's number one. And they'll need to be supported in core programs because they'll still be at-risk learners in the bubble around doing grade level work. Ultimately, Teachers turnover, teachers need support. As new teachers come into your district, new leaders, we've seen incredible investment by your internal team and your principals to understand this data, to understand the programs. I've presented twice this year to your principal team so that they could understand the data and monitor the metrics along the way. And I think that their investment is huge, and as turnover occurs there. Ultimately, we believe that for the next couple of years, ongoing coaching and professional training for your teachers is critical until this becomes the norm and this becomes institutionalized with your own internal experts to support this level of program.
And how do ELL kids fit in this?
Ultimately, we are targeting EL kids. Our interventions are monitored for EL students. We have numerous research studies with impact of ELL students, and I hope that ELL students are included in these interventions. They should, in our opinion, they should not be excluded. We don't think of interventions being for ELL students and non-ELL students. If a student is learning to read or learning to do basic math, we believe this gives them the best chance to do so.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Bain is known as LeBron James of data, so thank you, Dr. James. Just to give you a background of our intervention model that we have in place, I'm going to have Nicole Jackson, who's been our project manager, serving as the individual capacity builder or addressing professional capital with our teachers, but she's going to give you just a quick of what our intervention model and what these structural supports look like. You heard the data aspect of it. Now this is the actual program of it.
Thank you very much for letting us have the opportunity to present this data to you. I am proud to be working with you guys in Norwalk. If I say any more, I won't be able to continue. It's just great to see that kids are not going to need this for the rest of, they're only going to need it for a couple of years. It's not a life sentence. But let's talk about, with all the data gains, the growth you've seen, what does that mean? Like, what does a Read 180 class look like that could produce such gains in Math 180 and System 44? So when we're talking about Read 180, the model of blended learning that we have in Read 180 is also in System 44 and Math 180. When we started with Read 180, there's about 15 years of research and results to show that the blended learning model is what is most effective with intervention. So when you're in a Read 180 classroom, you're going to see different elements. First of all, at one point, the very first, and let's talk about it as if this is a 90-minute class. Okay, we'll start with that, and then we'll talk about the models that are in Norwalk, because there are some that are close to that and some that are less than that. If we're talking about a 90-minute or a double block or double period Read 180 class, the first 15 to 20 minutes is going to be your whole group teacher-directed instruction, and that's going to lay the groundwork for what's going to happen in your station rotations. And during your station rotations, you're going to have this 20-minute, 16 to 20-minute rotation, 3 rotations, where students are going to be in teacher-directed instruction in small group. They're also going to have some time for independent practice on the student application with text at their level. And they're also going to have time to be reading independently a book of their choice, whether electronically or in print. And what we have found is that with all of these elements, this blended learning model where you have the mix of the technology and you have the mix of the teacher instruction, it's data-driven. It's also some student choice. Student choice is a big element when it comes to the student application and independent reading. Because if students are non or struggling readers, they need choice to actually become motivated to read. If they want to read about Michael Jordan, they want to read about LeBron James, they're going to be more motivated even if it's a book that's above their level or longer than what they're used to reading. So we want to have that independent choice to develop student agency and to also develop that motivation. So for Norwalk, in some of the schools, when they have a double period, they have this model. But Norwalk, not every school has that model, so what they do instead is if they have to split it over 2 days, this is what it looks like. Your first day is going to have half of the class, half of that 90-minute block with the whole group in one small group rotation, and the second day, your B day, so to speak, you're going to have the other 2 rotations. So over the course of 2 days, students are going to participate in every element of the blended learning model. It's just going to take a little bit longer to get through your teacher-directed instruction. That's fine. It's not about going faster. It's about going deeper and scaffolding for students, giving them what they need. So when we talk about System 44 and Math 180, the same blended learning model is there. But because we're talking Tier 3 instruction for System 44, we're not going to have nearly as much student choice because they're not at the reading level yet. They need to learn how to read before they can choose a book to read. They do get the independent reading at some point, but we start off with a brief whole group introduction, then they move into software and teacher-directed instruction, and then teacher-supported independent reading on some days. Now for Norwalk, there's about 41 minutes for class periods if you're doing a single period. So sometimes what has to happen is that this whole group piece moves into small group. So even though we don't have the 55 to 60 minutes, we're going to make it work and do the best so we can get the highest bang for our buck, or for your buck actually. Math 180, very similar. There's a 5-minute do now. They have the blended learning model where there is small group learning and then the personalized software. The other component they have that I'm a little jealous of, they have this brain arcade. They get to do fluency practice, some problem-solving games. We don't have that for reading. I wish we did. But other than that, it's pretty much the same when it comes to the blended learning model. You have your teacher-directed instruction, you have your technology, but the technology is personalized so that if a student doesn't need practice on something, we fast track. If you need to practice something, they get corrective feedback and they get more practice with it. And the teacher can look at the data and determine how to differentiate instruction in small group if needed. So while that's happening, let's talk about next what this looks like in Norwalk. And I'm going to skip this slide in the interest of time, but this is really the impetus for Math 180. We want students to be here at algebra, and this is where many of them are starting. If you can look at the literacy structural support side, I believe it says slide 10 up here. Let's see what that looks like in Norwalk for percentage of students in Read 180 and System 44. As we're looking at that, you can see 709 students at middle schools are in literacy intervention. 505 are in Read 180, and then 204 are in System 44, which is our Tier 3 program. And just looking at the graphs here, you're going to see the same color combination throughout, where we go from lighter to darker red for grades 6 through 8, and lighter to darker blue for grades 6 through 8 for System 44. So you're going to see that there are a majority of students more students in Read 180, and that was based on our placement, although they may have been, there was a happy accident to have students who they thought were going to be in System 44 at the beginning of the year, but we decided that placement, looking at the data, they were really Read 180 student candidates, which is a good problem to have because that means they're closer to becoming proficient and going to Tier 1 instruction. And I just want to show you based on, based on each school, the distribution of System 44 and Read 180, and how many teachers we're implementing. If we're looking at Nathan Hale, we have 14 teachers implementing. It was an all-hands-on-deck approach. Each teacher is teaching one Read 180 or System 44 class in addition to their 5 content area classes. And they have 198 students throughout both programs. If we're looking at West Rocks, this has a mix of standalone where they have dedicated teachers, one dedicated teacher for grade 7 and 8 in Read 180 and some System 44 students, and other teachers who are teaching one section of Read 180 or System 44 in addition to the other responsibilities they have. Ponus Ridge has fewer teachers than many of the others. They have dedicated Read 180 and System 44 teachers for most of their students, and they have 2 special education teachers who are teaching grade 6 and grade 7. Roten Middle School has a mix as well. They have a couple of teachers who are teaching majority of System 44 Read 180, and then other teachers just teaching that one section amidst the other 5 periods of their day. As we look at math, I just want to point out that for math we have differentiated by Course 1 and Course 2, and that's based on skills. There are never going to be, if you're placed appropriately, students in 6th grade or 7th grade in Course 2, because if they were in Course 2 Math 180, that's equated to grade level content. There's no need to be teaching them in a separate class grade level content if they're going to get that in their Tier 1 class. So for this, just so you know, most times you will have only grade 8 students in a middle school setting in Course 2. But as we're looking here, you're going to see that a majority of students are in Course 1 over throughout the district, and the 338 students being serviced. And then we have pretty equal distribution, a little bit bigger bubble at grade 7 for Course 1 instruction. what that looks like by school. Nathan Hale has 3 teachers servicing 36 students in grades 7 and 8. And all grade 7 students are course 1, grade 8 students are course 2. If we look at West Rocks, vast majority, 96%, almost everyone was identified, was put into course 1. There are some students in course 2 in grade 8, and pretty much a third, if you round it, a third of the 8th, a third across for course 1 is distributed between grade 6 and 8. They have teachers who are teaching, one dedicated Math 180 teacher, and other teachers who are teaching a couple sections. Yes?
Is the figures for Nathan Hale such because of Teach to One is also there?
Yes, the grade 6 students were in the Teach to One, so that is, I'm not going to steal Dr. Saki's thunder, he can talk about that.
Sorry.
Yes, but yes, that's right, that's why there's no grade 6 students in the Math 180 intervention. Okay. As we're looking at Ponus Ridge has 1 teacher, and he is teaching an A-B day schedule, so students, he sees all 115 students, but not all every day. He sees them every other day. So he has an A day and a B day cohort. And as you see, they're pretty, little bit bigger bubble of grade 7 course 1 students, but you can see the distribution, almost equal. Rowan has, and I have the asterisks here for 4 teachers because first semester they had 4 teachers, and now they have consolidated and have a long-term sub teaching all of the classes now. And that's it for the day. Yes, sir.
So that happened, there's a long-term sub because, is that intentional?
It was a restructuring at the school. They decided that they were going to, I know that the district, there was a conversation they were having. I just know that it got the reassignment so that there's 1 teacher teaching all of the students at Rhoton Middle School.
Okay.
So, but I want to be fair that this is based on, there's a change, so in case something changes, you wonder why.
Yeah.
All of this, regardless of how many students we have, and as Dr. Bain had mentioned, I firmly believe it, is based on the fact that we are able to collaborate as HMH with the teachers and work with them, and it's really a student-centered focus. So, and really to talk briefly, I just want to set that the student-centered coaching, we look at the student data to establish the goals. What do the students need? Because if you're doing your best, and you have wonderful instructional practices that you're using, but somehow your students are still not growing, well, let's look and see what your students are struggling with, and let's see what we can do to tweak that. How can we target even better? Based on the job-embedded coaching, I want you to know that the type of professional learning sessions we've delivered, they've been not 14 PD days, but over the course of the types of professional development we've given, if it's been 2-hour segments for teachers who are not able to attend the pre-service trainings, for the teachers who are able to attend the trainings we've been giving over the year, tech sessions we've held, it's been 14. And then between the 2 programs, we had delivered, as of beginning of February, 97 coaching days. So there's been a lot of support. There's still going to be support this next year, and we hope the rest of the school year. And I found coaching helpful when I was a teacher. I can't speak for the teachers, but I do know that they do. Some teachers have, it just speaks for itself. I think the data's there. Having somebody to help you understand what you're doing. So you, that first year teacher feeling you get when you're teaching a new program, it's mitigated by the fact there's someone who's been more experienced who can help you. We've worked with 51 public school teachers, Norwalk public school teachers, 35 in Read 180 and System 44, and 16 Math 180 teachers. And there's a lot more information here about how the assignments, like I'd spoken about dedicated teachers and teachers just teaching one section, and that's in that.
Can you talk about what model works best? That, is it better to have a dedicated teacher who's only teaching 180, or is it better to have a teacher that's teaching, a conventional math class and sees those students and then sees them again in the 180 class?
I found the data's, I think it depends on the teacher, but I do believe that when I was teaching Read 180 personal experience all day, every day, I became an expert. If you're like a teacher who's teaching one content area, they become an expert. So I believe that and the data has shown us in other school districts, a standalone works really well. When teachers are dedicated to it, they can focus their time on their craft.
Yeah. And as we go into a block schedule in grades 7 and 8, that will be the model by necessity, a dedicated teacher on each of those teams. I'm looking at the clock, and we need to spend at least 15 minutes on the Phase 2 Next Steps recommendation. So we're going to ask Dr. Sacchi to limit himself to 5 minutes, okay? Now you have material on this. You have a whole slide deck, a lengthy one showing the success of Teach to One Math. This is a program the board is very familiar with. We've received help from the Dalio Family Foundation with implementing this, and it's our only ubiquitous math program. A special ed student can be in it, a remedial student, an advanced accelerated student, and everyone works at their own rate and pace. And I wish I had been there when the foundation was doing its review, and Dr. Sacchi had a focus group of students, and they were explaining to the visitors why they were doing so well in math, and they were contrasting it to last year's math classes and so on. And it was just an amazing commentary from students who were very insightful as to why their learning had been accelerated. But anyway, Dr. Sacchi, you're the guy who has worked so hard on this, so if you could give the board a little bit of an overview.
So I am going to try and get through this very quickly, and so I know most of you probably do not have a general overview of Teach to One. So this is starting from slide 32 in your packets. I'm not going to read through most of it, but the charge for me was trying to find something that was personalized and able to reach each individual student. I wasn't necessarily looking at groups of students or even pairs of students, but how do we target every single child at their instructional level? This was the closest thing through all the research that we had seen that actually got to individualized and personalized instruction for a student. So the amazing thing with Teach to One, it's actually
31.
Has
32. That one.
We're actually, yes, we're on, it's on the original big packet. I think it's slide number 33 at this point. And the way the TTO program works is that through how the students perform in their MAP assessment, that MAP data is loaded into the TTO program, and that's what actually creates its child skills library for the year. The power of the skills library is that at any given point in time, depending on how a child is performing, they can switch between topics, fairly quickly. The skill library, based on how they perform on the various maps, can also be adjusted. So from the first administration, second administration, how the results are, that also changes what the skill library is going to look like. The interesting thing too is that students will be receiving math a little bit underneath their grade level, at their grade level, and above the grade level. Just to give you a quick story, I had two parents. I've been telling my parents a lot that tell me more about how your students are experiencing math. And so I had two parents who said, my child is really struggling in math. Math is very, very difficult. I said, okay. So I went and I pulled the child's data. Child had about a 95 average and had grown like about 6 to 12 points, okay? And I said, yes, what your child is experiencing now is math at their instructional level. That's why it's hard. It's not supposed to be easy. They're having the math exactly the way they need it, and then there's supports put in place to give them a good foundation, and then it carries them on from there. So that's why, and the parents kind of accepted that. They understood the whole idea of getting the instruction at your level and then building from there. So that's been a good testament so far, even from the student's perspective. There are different modalities. There are about 6 different modalities that a child can experience in any given period of time. So the 6, a couple of them are teacher-led, a couple of them are student-led, and then some are independent with technology. The teacher ones, and I have some pictures that I'll show you briefly. The teacher-led modalities is what you see in terms of an actual instruction, like a live investigation or a task. life investigation, classroom teacher, the traditional model of the classroom teacher, working with a group of students, teaching them something. A task is a little bit longer, so again, classroom teacher working with a group of students on a real world problem over a course of time. Student collaboration, when we get into the pictures, I'll show you a little bit more of that. To me, that's like a very powerful piece of it, because you ask kids, you have a group of students sitting down trying to solve a math problem, giving each other feedback, sharing ideas and working collaboratively to solve that problem. Similar to peer-to-peer, two students, a task, and the students are working on that. In terms of the independent modalities, that's a child with their electronic device. There's a virtual instruction, so there will be some instances where a child might see a topic for the first time through the computer. There's virtual reinforcement where a child has learned something, but they still need a little bit more practice on it, so they get reinforcement on that skill. There's independent practice where the child is getting to practice skills that they feel they're comfortable with, but they need a little bit more practice on. So what does a day for a TTO student look like? At the beginning of the day, the students come in. They have two options of where to know where they're going to be going for their first modality. They can see we have these wonderful screens in the front as they walk into the rooms, and then when they go into their math advisory sections on their computer, that also tells them where they're going to be going next. In any given day, a child will have two rotations, so they might have like a task and then a virtual instruction, or they might have a small group collaboration and a live investigation. So in any given day, 82-minute span, the child will see two different modalities during the course of that time. Once the kids go through about 65 to 70 minutes, they take an exit slip. The power of the exit slip is that based on how the exit slip is only covering the topics that they worked on for that day. Based on how the students perform on the exit slip is what's going to determine their grouping for the next day. So if you walked into the class today and then you walk into the class tomorrow, you're not going to see the same grouping of students, because it's all going to be based on how they performed the day before. Some kids might be very strong in fractions and cruising through. A kid might be stronger in decimal. So it's always going to change, and to me that's been the power of this particular program. It was important to have the teachers obviously played a critical part to making this happen. There's a lot of planning that's involved. The beauty of the plan is that every day, once this exit slip is submitted, at about 4:30, the teachers get pretty much their playlist for the day, who they have, what the groupings look like, and they even have sample lesson plans that they can use. So obviously, if I'm a teacher and I've been teaching fractions for years, I can either use the recommended lesson plan, or I can go into my toolkit and pull my lessons on fractions and use those as well. So it does give them the flexibility to be able to use both, but it also gives them the sort of like the guidance in terms of the specific topics that have to be taught. So just quickly, this is an example of like a small group collaboration, where you have a group of kids, working together to solve, sorry, this is slide 36, group of students working collaboratively to solve a real world problem. This is an example of a task or a live investigation where you have the classroom teacher kind of leading the lesson. Another example of a live investigation, teacher working with a group of students to solve a problem. And these are the different modalities in terms of the various instruction with the technology. The interesting thing is that for every student that you see is literally working on something completely different. And you wouldn't walk and see the kids on anything that's the same. And even in terms of the exit slips that they're responding to, all the questions are also different, because the questions are tailored for that specific child. Before I get into into some of the, I'm running out of time. If I get into some of the results quickly, I just wanted to mention that in the 6th grade we do not have, going back to Mr. Barber's question, we do not have a math intervention in the 6th grade because it's embedded into the program. So the fact that students are, so it could be a 6th grader functioning at a 3rd grade level, but he's still getting the instruction at a 3rd grade level, then it's built up from there to his instructional level. So just quickly in terms of some of the data, 16% of our students who started off below, this is slide 41, started off below grade level, are now at the national average. The average growth for the 100 of 16 students who started off below grade level, the average growth for those students was about 5.2 points. 61% of the same group of students met or exceeded their projected growth, and this is just from fall to winter. Again, quickly, the average, now this is the group that started up above grade level. For that group of students, 72% of those students met or exceeded their projected growth, and 88% of these students performed above the national average. All right, so, and again, this is just based on their Tier 1 math instruction. Sixth graders, again, performed 22% better than the national average as a whole when you combine both. This is slide 43, when you kind of combine the above average and the below average students. 65% of all students met or exceeded their individual growth targets. And I've been very, very excited in serving the teachers in terms of the growth that the students have been making. Right now, our goal for next year is to expand TTO to 7th and 8th grade. So we're going to be able to implement fully in 6th through 8th grade. We do know that we also have some 8th graders who might be going or heading towards geometry. So we have made accommodations for those students as well, so that they have TTO kind of goes up until the end of algebra. So I know they're working on a geometry portion to it, but as of now, that's what we have. So we had to make accommodations for those students. We're currently going to be getting our second site. We're proposing our current library, and we're going to be creating a learning commons in a separate location, state-of-the-art learning commons to replace our current library, and that new site should hold about 125, roughly 150 students. So that was me kind of flying through that presentation. Any questions?
This is an intervention program, though.
This is a
intervention program.
No, intervention is completely. This is a personalized math instructional program for every child. So that's why, in terms of how it's the starting point of the students taking the MAP assessment, based on the initial results from the MAP assessment, that's what's incorporated into the Teach to One system. And that's what creates the child's playlist for the year. So when I was talking about the whole playlist, it shows where all the holes are that the child had from the MAP assessment. And so that's what the actual playlist is, kind of plugging the holes and then building from there.
But I don't think every sixth grader was every sixth grader in Teach to One?
Mm-hmm. Every sixth grader was in Teach to One.
And so as you add this, every student will be in?
Correct. So yeah, so this is it's a personalized math program, so it's personalized for each individual student. And I think sometimes when you actually see it in action, it'll be helpful to just see how the program runs. But it is again a personalized, individualized program for each child.
So if you have 125 kids in the second site you're going to develop, second lab, you've got the current lab. Is that enough capacity for all the students who are at Nathan Hale?
Yes, because we'll be rotating it through roughly three blocks. So at any given point in time, we should be able to have 225 to 230 students range.
So between 3 blocks of okay.
Correct. So again, I'm highly Teach to One has been telling us a lot just in terms of they've never seen such a rollout, and I keep saying I commend, the teachers for kind of like owning this and saying, how we're going to make this work. And they've gone above and beyond and making it work. And going back to what Dr. Connor was saying, that was one of the reasons why, they had selected, Nathan Hale to be put into Ed Week, just because of the kind of growth that they've seen so far from the staff and from the students. So again, I commend the staff for a fantastic job with this.
So Dr. Sacchi, basically this is a program that's almost in lieu of Tier 2 interventions. It sounds like you're moving in on kids with an individualized program that hopefully eliminates even the need for the interventions.
Correct, yes. Hence us not even having the Math 180 in the 6th grade.
Yeah. Cool.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Now this is a next generation approach, right? There has been a lot of research, a lot of reporting on this in Education Week in terms of the early implementation. We're the only district in Connecticut that's doing this, and again, there has been a considerable investment in this and help from the Dalio Foundation, but we're very pleased with how it has worked and what you and your staff have done with it. I would encourage every board member to stop at Nathan Hale and visit the TTO lab, and I think you'll be extremely impressed. And I think you'll also see students that are learning to be independent learners. The confidence level of students in that lab in a subject that is not, you know, the natural inclination of many of us is incredible. And again, you know, kudos to you and your staff for a good job implementing this. One of the decisions here was, you know, do we move this to another school in the 6th grade or attempt to get a complete implementation at Nathan Hale and a proof point before any replication is attempted? And I think the answer to that, as Dr. Sacchi explained, is we'd like to get a whole school implementation and a proof point before it goes anywhere else.
It is a completely disruptive, innovative model, and is the future of our schools. It's inevitable at this point. James Cotter highlights in his book, Leading Change, 6 different steps or 8 different steps of how to effectively make change within an organization. And phase 1 highlights, supports and underscores his 6th step, which is celebrating short-term wins. So I want to congratulate everybody with phase 1 short-term success as we move forward to long-term success. And as you can see, our intervention supports, our intervention models are strongly in place. However, to that, we need to be able to deepen our multi-tiered system of support, and that is our program. So a part of phase 2, a recommendation that we are going to bring to you, is that we continue the work that we did from in grade 5 to design a curriculum that is seamlessly aligned to the Common Core state standards. So now as we look for phase 2 with the middle school redesign process, phase 2 is going to consist of the vertical articulation and prioritization of the standards that we did for K-5, so there won't be any disjunctions within our instructional curriculum systems for 6 through 8. Ms. Janine Goss will be presenting phase 2, one element of phase 2, which is the RCD process.
We're on slide 47. I can just speak to it. I'll just be a few minutes. So as Dr. Connor said, interventions are really, really important, but guess what? Your core Tier 1 curriculum is just as important. So as Dr. Connor said, it's really critical that we create this in-house curriculum to be sure that we've got that alignment between K-5 and now 6-8. And so we've been through this process already last summer where we did this K-5 with ELA and math, excuse me. And we're going to be doing the exact same thing with 6 through 8. So I'm on slide 48. Common Core is not sufficient enough, okay? We have to make sure that we take a look at those standards. There could be about 50 standards in ELA and math. And so we have to make sure that we help focus teachers on the content and skills that they actually need to be teaching so that we can see what students need to understand and be able to do. If you look at the next slide, 3 important goals here. We want to make sure we create that alignment between this content-rich curriculum and those cross-curricular connections. So this summer, we plan to partner our ELA practitioners along with our social studies practitioners to get that cross-curricular disciplinary interaction. We also want to make sure we partner our math teachers with science teachers as well for that integration so that we are really efficient in the delivery of the content and the skills. Equally important is that vertical alignment Dr. Connor spoke about. We want to make sure when we see that vertical flow that we look for omissions and we look for gaps or overlap. And this is really, really critical. We build district leadership and teaching capacity. It's a natural byproduct of this process. We receive such intense professional development when we go through this rigorous curriculum design process. I did show you this previously. One of the very important steps is to prioritize the standards, and we look at this criteria. We look to make sure that their readiness factor is there. Do kids actually need this standard to make sure that they can move on to the next level? All standards are important, but what we can do is we can emphasize them at different points in the year. We look for endurance. Is this going to help take kids from one grade level to the next and from course to course? We look at leverage. That's a criteria. Are there those cross-curricular connections? That's important. And of course, we look at those state tests. What are heavily represented in those high-stakes assessments? Also embedded are performance tasks. These authentic performance tasks, those are those engaging scenarios that students are challenged with that go from the beginning of the year as being a little less complex to more complex throughout the year. And this slide just kind of shows that overall organization. They are unpredictable, they're real-world application, they are engaging, cross-curricular connections. They provide students with opportunities to show us that they have mastered those standards, those priority standards. Also, I should mention that these tasks are very much connected with Bloom's taxonomy and depth of knowledge. Those are those learning frameworks that sort of tell us what cognitive demands are embedded in those tasks. On the next slide, I showed you an example of what the a grade 5 ELA curriculum looks like, where you see we've got our skills-based unit title. K5 decided to go with a skills-based curriculum, pacing with approximate dates, the overarching ever-present and priority standards. On the next slide, it continues, where you see that we also highlight those supporting standards that help support those priority goals. And on this last slide, we further unpack those priority standards to look at those cognitive demands. Another key component that you're not going to see here tonight, but is in every map, are the alignment of the resources. So we don't want to have to follow a resource from page to page, and so what we do is we align those materials to match the priority standards and those supporting standards so that we can best meet the needs of our kids. So all in all, I would say, when you look at this, curriculum design is really an event. It's not an event, it's a process that keeps students at the center. We have a really well laid out plan. There's our timeline, starting all the way from the informational session for teachers and administrators that will start in April to our rollout in August. So it will very much mirror the exact same process we went through last year. Any questions? Good?
And Janine, that's going to be for all 3, 6th, 7th, and 8th?
6th, 7th, and 8th grade in math and ELA.
And will it require any new textbooks or?
We have our primary resources, and we're going to use our primary resources in addition to any secondary resources that teachers identify. Lots of digital resources as well. I think we have everything we need.
Okay. And will there be any renewed emphasis on writing?
Absolutely. So as we prioritize standards, we are prioritizing not only the reading standards, but the writing standards. That is part of it.
Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ginny. And in order for these design elements to work together, there has to be a strong interface between the curriculum as well as our interventions, as well as the standalone model that Ms. Jackson has alluded to in regards to Read 180, Math 180, Systems 44. However, when we look at the context of how we want to be able to sustain it, we have to look at relationships, relevance, and rigor. And the creation or the new organizational structure that we're going to propose to you tonight recommends that we create small learning communities to be able to not just have that cross-curricular interface with one another, with teachers, but more importantly, students be able to have deep relationships with practitioners. So Mr. Kreller will be reviewing Phase 2 recommendations as well.
Hi, folks. This slide deck is your last packet. It says Phase 2 Next Steps, so you can follow along there with us. We have copies for the audience, too. There's more up here if you want to come get a copy. Okay, so we are really excited to be here with you tonight. I hope you get the impression that we're really passionate about the success we've had, especially in 6th grade with middle school redesign, and we're really looking forward to extending that success up into 7th and 8th grade. What we're really asking for tonight is your support as we move to phase 2 of our middle school redesign process. And what you see up on the screen is essentially 3 vertical houses. So we're moving away from a traditional teaming model towards interdisciplinary multi-grade houses, and there's a sample up there on the screen as well. I think before we go any further, though, we have to take a moment just to define exactly what a smaller learning community is. So let's put that up there for your perusal. We've shared a lot of this research over the last year and a half with the Middle School Redesign Committee, and we really want to take this to the next level. And when you look at the definition, a few hundred students, we already have traditional teams of about 125 each. We'd like to get that number actually down closer to 75 or less. So we're really looking at smaller learning communities so that teachers have a chance to build the kind of relationships that Dr. Connor referred to that are really going to result in higher student achievement, more rigor, making the material relevant to our students. We've had the good fortune here in Norwalk to work closely with the International Center for Leadership in Education, ICLE. Dr. Daggett's been here a few times. We work with some of his best people, not only on instructional rounds, but also on relationships, relevance, and rigor. You cannot have rigor without relevance. You cannot have relevance without good teachers. You don't have student achievement without great relationships between teachers and students. So that's really our goal here. This is the same rubric that Dr. Connor put up earlier. We believe that we have to move students rapidly towards quadrant D up here, where both the student works and thinks. And in order to do that, we really have to establish not only solid curriculum, but smaller learning communities where people can talk and work with children at their level. So that's really our goal here. What we would like to do is extend block scheduling up into both grades 7 and 8. We had originally planned on a 3-year phase-in. In cooperation with the union, we've decided to move forward with block scheduling in both 7th and 8th grade. We definitely want to continue to increase opportunity to learn via successful interventions that we're already using that you've heard about tonight, things like System 44, Read 180, Math 180, and a number of computer adaptive programs like Compass Learning, MyPath, LightSail, Edgenuity, and others that we use. We are offering tremendous support for teaching and learning, not only the coaching model that you saw from Ms. Jackson, but we have one of our partners here tonight, Tony Fiera. Tony works for the Center for Secondary School Redesign. They've provided extensive professional development on both our PD days and monthly and weekly with visits to the schools. We plan to continue this at every grade level and offer more support for Tier 1 instruction and also help build these smaller learning communities so we can build those relationships between teachers and students. We do have some underlying goals. Obviously, we want to reduce the teacher-student load, smaller teams and classes. We want to create smaller learning communities. In cooperation with the union, we had agreed to try to keep all teachers within their certification and on the same team. We're not going to be cross-teaming. That's one of our main goals. We're going to increase interventions and opportunities to learn because, quite frankly, they're working. Our success that you heard about tonight has really placed us in the top 1% for growth on programs like Math 180 and Read 180 in the entire United States. I think Dr. Bain will concur we're rivaled only by Asbury Park, right, the land of Springsteen down there. So we're one of the top areas for growth. Many of our students are exceeding national growth norms by 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Dr. Connor and I will be speaking Thursday at a national math convention. We're the spotlight district because of the extremely high growth that we've had in mathematics this year. It's actually quite incredible. I don't know if you noticed on the slides that Dr. Bain put up, there was a column for 100 quantile points, which is about 2 times normal. Norwalk is going to have to add a few more columns for the kids who score 250 and 350 points above normal. So we're actually getting that kind of growth with our interventions. We absolutely want to maintain Encore. I know that is important to the Board of Education as well. And we intend to meet all of our NFT contract obligations. We believe that the schedule we're about to present meets all 5 domains of best practice. The research will show that teachers and students need self-determination, identity, high personalization, which Dr. Sacchi talked about with Teach to One and all of our interventions. We're offering tremendous support for teaching and learning, and we want some functional accountability. We want to look at results. We want to see what programs work. We have an independent benchmark in NWA, and that allows us to evaluate everything that we implement from a very independent level as well. This is a typical schedule that you might see next year, and the interesting thing about this schedule is that it allows for every type of teacher-to-teacher, teacher-student meeting. What you see across this schedule is the entire 6th grade would be off the same period. That enables the entire 6th grade to meet as a team. That enables an interdisciplinary team to meet every single day if they choose to work with students. It also allows academic subjects like all of the math teachers or all of the English teachers or all of the science teachers to meet every single day if they so choose. And that's true for both 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. We've also allowed for vertical team meetings. The highlighted yellow block that you see in the middle is actually the lunch block. That's about 123 minutes at each of our schools. So that has both a teaching block and a lunch block, and every 3rd day it's possible for an entire 6th, 7th, and 8th grade team to have an extended lunchway where they can meet as a vertical house. We've basically allowed for all 4 out of 4 of the type of meetings that teachers might have in a typical week. I just want to pause right here to see if there are any questions.
The schedule you're showing, it's more of a mix. It's really a teacher schedule, more so than a student, because obviously a student doesn't have prep.
Correct.
Okay. Craig, can you comment on the student schedule? We're going to have 90-minute blocks in reading and math, which is the essence of the block schedule that is now in 6th. That'll be going to 7th and 8th, and then comment on the rest of the day, if you will.
So for a typical student, their English language arts and their mathematics blocks would be full blocks every day. So they'd meet for the full 82 or 84 minutes every day. They would also have a block for math and science, but it would be every other day. So you're getting twice as much math and science, the same amount of social studies. Twice as much ELA and math, the same amount of social studies and science. All of the other related arts, gym, art, music, and even the interventions like Math 180 and Read 180 would be what we call skinnies or singletons. They would be half blocks of 45 minutes. And it really has to be that way so that a student can take everything they need to take. Everything can't be on the block. Everything can't be double time. It's a finite day from 8:30 to 3:05. But by putting related arts and interventions on what we call the skinnies or the singletons or the half blocks, it allows every student to have both intervention and enrichment.
Greg, 2 questions. So if you're looking at here, so you basically have a 3-block, each day will be 3 blocks.
The teacher will teach 3 out of 4 blocks. A student will have 4 out of 4 blocks. Students are book solid. Teachers would teach 3 out of 4, Mike.
Because that lunch block is really a student block. It's 120 minutes, it's 82, lunch is 38 minutes or whatever.
The lunch block is over 120, so once you subtract the 30-minute contractual lunch, there's still a 90-minute teaching period in there.
Okay. So it's really a 4 period day.
4 block day.
4 block day, okay. And then, so 4 block day, every other day, so to speak. And then.
Every day for math and ELA, every other day for social studies and science.
And then where do the skinnies fit into? You have 2 skinnies in 1 block, is that effectively?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. So that would be everything from what they call rainbows to music, art, foreign language.
Mm-hmm.
Where does AT fit in that?
AT can be distributed throughout all of the 3 blocks during the
AT,
day.
unfortunately, is still a pullout, right? And for the most part, students are pulled out from English language arts. That is not best practice. We have to work on this in terms of the redesign of AT. That will be a major objective for next year. The growth of our highest students is not reflective of the growth you saw tonight. Their performance is basically flat. And that suggests that the AT design is not effective or following national research and a national model. So that is a growth area for us. It's an area for improvement for the future. Now, obviously, if you have to begin somewhere, you begin with the students who are most in need, which is reflective of the presentation you saw tonight. But all of our students need to be able to grow and get the best education experience they have. So I think we can anticipate one more a year of AT pullout. The other part of the middle school AT program which is unique to Norwalk is subject. They do it by subject area. And again, that is antithetical to the whole nature of gifted education, which is interdisciplinary and the application of skills at higher levels, right? And so it's never by subject level. But that's what we evolved to historically somehow.
But it's always been by subject level, though.
It has.
Always.
It has, but it's not that way anywhere else. And again, there's no national gifted model that espouses that. So again, this is an area we have work to do in terms of redesign. It will be one of the elements in the third phase of middle school redesign, but not included in the second.
Dr. Adamowski, if I could just ask one question. So we're looking at possibly changing that not for the coming year, but the following year?
Correct.
After that?
Yes.
And really looking at how we're going to work on our AT program?
Yeah, we're going to, AT is going to be one of the objectives I'm going to be recommending to you for next year as our goals that implement our strategic operating plan. And this will require a year of study, a year of involvement with the teaching staff. And, again, we anticipate going through some of the same steps as we did with intervention in terms of professional development, training, adopting a new model, learning to do things in a different way.
From a scheduling viewpoint in the 17-18 school year, AT will be in one of these skinnies? Is that
No, it'll continue to be a pull-out.
Oh, from ELA?
Yeah, so generally the students are pulled out from ELA classes.
Okay. And can you, and it's a separate topic, so this 4-block schedule compares to today, I believe, a 7-period day?
8.
Oh, 8-period day. So, and teachers out of that 8-period day teach how many, under contractually, how many periods?
246 minutes, which is equivalent to 3 blocks or 6 skinnies. It's the exact same minutes and almost the exact same student load. The beauty of this schedule is that all of 6th grade teachers will have teams of about 75 students or less. We're pretty excited about that. So you as a parent or a student only deal with 3 teachers. The teachers only deal with 75 students all year long. We've taken a class of 225 or more, and instead of breaking it into teams of 125, we've gotten it right down to a group of 75. So this 6th grade team that you see right here would be an ELA teacher, a math teacher, and 1 teacher who would teach science and social studies. So 3 teachers, 75 students, the same 75 students, the same 3 teachers all year long. That is truly a smaller learning community. The same would be true for all 7th and 8th grade ELA and math. They would have no more than 75 students. Some would actually have 50 or 60, depending on the size of the school. The only teachers who would have more than 75 students would be 7th and 8th grade science and social studies. They would in fact have to teach both 7th grade and 8th grade within their certification. That's why you see the line here between 6th and 7th grade, because some teachers are only certified K6 and can only teach up through 6th grade. Others are certified 7-12. So we're trying to keep them on the same team within their certification area.
Do we have any teachers that are certified both categories?
We do have some. Yep.
Going back to my question, which I didn't ask very clearly, the 246 minutes, which is 3 blocks, what is that currently? Is that 5 periods, 5 out of 7 periods?
It would be 6 out of 8.
6 out of 8.
246 minutes.
In 7th and 8th currently.
This brings a little equity, Mike, back to the system. Everybody's teaching the exact same minutes, same number of students.
Which isn't necessarily happening now.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Just wanted to say a word about Encore. That has been one of the most popular aspects of our initial steps in middle school redesign. And I know there was concern that in settling the 2 grievances with the NFT that would be lost. But there's also a way to have encore courses under this block system. Let's say a school wanted to offer encore 2 days a week or 1 day a week. What they would do is they would shorten up all the periods a little that day to create a 45 or 50-minute block at the end of the day and offer encore. The beauty, though, of a house structure, as opposed to our vertical, our current horizontal teams, the beauty of a vertical house structure is that you can actually open the encore courses that summer, that day or period based on student interest across grades. So you could have 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in the same encore activity. And students would self-select based upon their interests, their developmental level, what they like, and so on. So you could have a chess team that is comprised of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and so on. So there are lots of advantages to this. It simplifies things for us. It takes an old, antiquated industrial system that got very complex as a result of just kind of building onto it continually as opposed to redesigning it, and I think gives us something that is comparable to best middle school practices and something that would be followed by the best middle schools in the country. Now that's the aspiration, and there's a lot of work to do to get there, just as you saw from the small efforts that were made in grade 6 this year.
Stephen, one concern I've heard a little bit about this model is that that team, that vertical team, those kids would be having lunch together. So instead of just having lunch, all 6th graders, you'd be having lunch with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Is that an issue at all? Or?
Mike, I was a principal, and this was the first time when I came to Norwalk seeing grade level lunch waves, grade 6, grade 7, grade 8. I was a principal for 5 years, and all my 5 years, I'd never had an issue having multi-grade level lunch waves. Now, the issue that I did have was with the kindergarten 1st and 2nd graders. So the K1, 2 babies, yes, 6, 7, 8 multi-grade level lunches, not a problem. Did it for 5 years consecutively. It's how you structure the lunch waves. 6th graders might be on one side, 7th graders might be in the middle, 8th graders might be on the right side, but absolutely no issues.
Okay, thanks.
Our consultant, Tony Fiera, is here from CSSR, and he would agree. I've heard Tony say that, they ride the bus together, they live together. Why can't they have lunch and do encore together? This is an inclusionary practice, not exclusionary. So we're actually pretty excited about that. But for the sake of transparency, absolutely, when you look at these vertical houses, these children will be teamed across age and grade, no question about it.
So the lunch waves have been very successful when you had 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
All together, yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So back to Dr. Adamowski's point, encore can be easily scheduled with the expectation that it might be once or twice a week, and that's very easy to do. Very easy to do, so we don't want to have a distraction here with that. But we believe that these houses will create opportunities for all of the things that are up on this final slide, and these will be in future phases of middle school redesign.
I think we're open for board questions. We know you've thrown a lot of information out on you tonight, but hopefully you've seen a progression between where we were, where we are now, and where we hope to go in the future.
Craig, I got an email from a middle school teacher today saying that his understanding of the plan, that class sizes are going to get bigger and that teachers will be forced to teach multiple subjects. Can you comment on those?
No. In fact, class sizes might be the same or smaller, and actually multiple subjects we've eliminated, because if you're certified 712 social studies now, you'll only teach social studies in that vertical team. You might have to teach it to 7th and 8th grade, but you'll be within your certification area.
So we don't anticipate, and I think this is an important point to emphasize, because there is a lot of misinformation going around on this, as there was last year, right? And so we're going through the same change process, but we don't anticipate any changes in class size, in the number of teachers taught by a particular, the number of students taught by a particular teacher, or in the number of preparations that a teacher has, or the number of subjects that they teach. And we tend to follow the contract, which is a challenge at times. We intend to follow the contract in every respect. and the settlement of the grievances that the NFT had filed earlier this year really have set the stage for moving into this block schedule, because all the grievances dealt with 7th and 8th, not with 6th, where the block schedule was very consistent with the contract. So we're not anticipating any changes in class size and in any aspect of the student-teacher relationship.
Thank you.
We're also dramatically increasing the opportunity for the teachers to meet, not only during their prep periods, but during that 3-day extended lunch block rotation. So we're making opportunities for them to make the most of smaller learning communities. Because if you're a teacher now, Mike, and you have 6 classes of 25, now you're only going to have 3 blocks on any given day. You're only going to see 75 students. You're going to see half the number of students that you see right now. So if anything, there'll be a reduction in the number of students you see every day.
And the teachers in the special areas, they will maintain the 150 that they would see. Everybody's going to see 150. It's either 75 each day or it's 150 over 2 days.
Because contractually in middle school, we don't have the same limits like in high school. So.
We don't have limits on the number of students in middle school. Middle school day is defined by time, but there are also other restrictions, the number of preparations, the number of subjects you can teach, and so on. And we have to be consistent with all of that, and we've committed to doing that.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
That's great.
Right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well done.
Any questions for Dr. Connor?
I can just add, I think we've come a long way from the beginning, discussing this until now. So thank you for all that you've done in the presentation on this tonight.
Yeah, a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of 3 a.m. conversations with Craig Kreller, so looking forward to that, right?
That's torture, we understand. But really, it's great to see a program coming together like this, and particularly the generated results with the children who have been struggling is phenomenal. I mean, the speaker said we were like in the top 1% of improvement shown, and you know, this is why we did all of this work on the strategic plan, is to start getting results, and it's good to see it's happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. That's it, right? Off to public comments.
Okay.
All right, next item is public comments.
Okay, we have a few public comments here. Let me just get my timer going. Our first public speaker is Joe Jandirko. Remember, you've got 3 minutes, and I will call you when the time's up.
Good evening, board. My name is Joseph Jandirko. Middle school redesign has been a unique process from the beginning. The documents that created the design committee, we can see that there was a clear path to this point regardless of the input from some of the stakeholders, block schedule, enrichment, and vertical houses, to just name a few. The redesign has had some positive effects, and I'm here to thank the board for their work and spread a word of caution and concern at the same time. We have not been against block scheduling and only asked for careful, slower, and more steady implementation. We have embraced the increase in interventions in the time and learning. The block time frame has allowed for deeper teaching and better engagement with the material, and our students are doing better on the NWE testing, and our interventionists have actually received the national praise for their efforts to help close the achievement gap. We are getting more experience with the NWE testing and gaining more experience with the workshops, and it's starting to serve us well, as we heard earlier tonight. But at the same time, there are some serious gaps and potential problems which lay ahead. Next year, many more teachers across this district will be asked to teach multiple grades, multiple subjects, and create or continue enrichment classes. Where is the PD for these teachers? Where is the professional development for the new science teacher or the new social studies teacher? I have been teaching science for almost a year now with no science PD whatsoever. I was given none, but I was given the teacher's guide. I am managing, but I can do much better with some instruction in district practices. Teachers in these 2 subjects will actually see a doubling of their student load. Teachers will be asked to engage their students on a deeper, more personal level while seeing them every other day. Science and social studies teachers will have a student load as high as 150, and in some of our larger schools, even more than that. It should be noted that before middle school redesign, the largest caseload a teacher could have was around 140 because of the contract limits. World language teachers in high school are limited to 130, but however, in the middle school, some of our teachers teach as high as 190 students in foreign language. Much research has indicated that block scheduling leads to larger class sizes because it tends to limit the number of sections in which to slot students. In essence, there are fewer classes for students to be placed into, potentially leading to class sizes of 28 or larger at the middle school, and in some cases as high as 32 at 3 of our middle schools right now. Students and teachers do not benefit when subjects are devalued. Moving science and social studies to every other day does just that. In a district that's asking for nearly $70 million to build a new STEM school, we are actively engaged in creating a schedule which will shortchange our students in their science and social studies experience. I do not come here before you with all the answers, and I do come here with a simple request. Let us, the BOE, the administration, and the AFT do what is best for the students next year and implement the block schedule and reevaluate the idea of vertical teams in a year. The rush to implement so many new concepts could potentially interrupt and damage the progress we have made this year. Our goal should be to build on what we know works, the blocks, and evaluate the implementation of vertical houses more carefully. Let us redesign middle school once, correctly, rather than through a series of edicts and revisions. The idea of smaller communities does not always work. My caseload is 150 kids. I give a math test, a social studies test, I have 75 to grade. I give that science test, I have 75 to grade. And when we talk about rigor and relevance, they're asked to get it back to the students within 2 days. That's what our own consultants tell us. How am I to do that effectively?
Time's up.
That's what we're asking the teachers to do when we ask them to teach 2 subjects.
Time's up. Our next speaker is Mary Jordan.
Good evening, Mary Jordan, 9 Mott Avenue. We join the district in celebrating the successes of our interventions, especially the read and math program. Our teachers and the associated administrators and coaches did an amazing job. Many of our teachers began the year with very limited training and limited resources, but they did an amazing job for our students and school communities. Middle school teachers have, for the most part, enjoyed teaching in the block. This past week, we're learning details about next year's middle school schedules. It's both exciting, it's energizing to think about the changes that are possible and the improvements that we can make, and in some ways, it's disheartening. We will have new middle school math and language arts curriculum. We'll have new schedules for 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. We'll have new teams, new administrative structures. Some social studies teachers will become science teachers and vice versa, and we'll have to familiarize with new lessons, new classrooms, routines, and resources. We'll have to prepare for those associated challenges. We would respectfully request a more limited implementation of the vertical house structures, maybe in one building, while we work out the details before it goes system-wide. That's where our major concerns lie. For reasons that Mr. Jean Jocro just identified, in addition, there were other elements identified at the Middle School Redesign Committee, such as guidance counselors who would be in charge of bridging both 6th and 8th grade, and the oversized classes for sure. We would ask for a more careful implementation of the new elements, more careful planning, more professional development. We can do a lot more with more professional development and more collaboration. Communication and collaboration are essential. Teachers at NHS and Pathways Academy continue to watch as their buildings also face great uncertainties. We want good outcomes for the young adults at Pathways Academy, and there should be ways to accomplish that while respecting the needs of the NHS community. Communication and collaboration, again, are essential. Decisions should not be made unilaterally and should be made transparently. You can get a taste of what we experience by the STEM projects experience that were recently announced by way of a letter and a photocopied packet. All teachers in K-12 were suddenly directed to implement a STEM project in the next 2 months. With no professional development, no subject area specialist, very few resources, poor communication, and not enough time in some cases to pull it off. You can be assured that our excellent Norwalk teachers will continue to do what is needed at every level, despite the upheaval and uncertainty that face us in 2017. Thank you for listening.
And our last public speaker, Tony Santamaria.
Good evening. My name is Tony Santamaria. I pick up my grandchildren in the morning. I drop them off at Jefferson School in Ponis. And about 3 weeks ago, one of my grandsons said, I don't want to go to school. I don't like school no more, because he was being bullied. I went to the principal. He didn't have time to speak to me. I came to City Hall. I went to spoke to Miss Mora, I think her name is, around the corner from the superintendent's office, set up an appointment with him, but there was no need. They said, I'll set up an appointment. Meanwhile, I took my grandchildren out of school for safety purpose. And a couple days later, I get a phone call, we got an appointment at 11 o'clock. I showed up to the school, I waited about an hour, the principal came out. I don't have time, I have other things to do. Okay, set up an appointment, 11 o'clock. I said, well, I called central office, and his answer to me was, I set up my own appointments, I do my own thing in my school. And his own thing is, set up a meeting the next day. I went in, took my kid, he said, leave him here, so we left him. The other day he came home, his lunch bag got kicked like a football, he's still being picked on, and I get a truancy note. I have all notes from doctors and everything, and I have Miss Laura paperwork and an appointment. And another thing he told me, he goes, you choose the school district, but I didn't choose the abuse, and I'm not gonna stand for it, for the principal. We went to a PPT meeting at his school. It was people on the report, you know how they send you that letter from the PPT, and there was people there that wasn't even present in the PPT. I mean, how he's running the school, I don't know who the boss is, but it's terrible. I grew up in a school system in Norwalk. 7 of my kids got put through the system. Now I got 5 that I'm gonna put through the system. But if I have to homeschool them, I will. And that's my next move, I will. They send me a letter for truancy, and it's not even signed by whatever the lady is. It's just, you know, what is it? First my grandson gets bullied, now I'm gonna get bullied myself. I'm not gonna stand for it. And I wish I was living in an illegal apartment so I can be aware of what's going on with my grandchildren, but I don't, because we're too many. You know, we're separated, but, you know, I gotta pick them up and I know what's going on. And I wish somebody would take care of this problem. And bullying is very serious. I take it very serious. I don't want my grandson to raise a hand on nobody, because then I lost him. Once the kid raises a hand on another one, he knows that he won't get picked on that.
3 minutes.
Yeah, I'll lose him. He end up in prison. He will be another statistic. And that's the education that we're giving him.
Thank you for your comments. That concludes public comments this evening.
Mr. Lyons, could I just, Ms. Jordan's remarks reminded me of something that we should have had in tonight's presentation and didn't, and that was the role of the middle school guidance counselor. Because right now, they are assigned to, by grade, to different grades. So there's a 6th grade counselor, 7th grade counselor, 8th grade counselor. In the 6th, 7th, 8th grade vertical team or house, our counselors will be assigned by house. So there'll be 3 houses, there'll be a counselor, dedicated counselor for each house. They'll have the opportunity to start with students in grade 6 and follow them through grade 8. And we think that will be a better system as well. And again, we should have mentioned that in the presentation.
Okay. I also want to comment on a couple of the statements that were made in the public comments, particularly by the kids from Briggs. I want to make very clear, and I realize they had to leave because they had to get home, but nobody on this board has said one word saying that any of these children are animals, criminals, bad kids. I don't know who's been putting those thoughts in these children's minds. But there's nobody on this board who has ever said one word like that about the children of Briggs, and I guarantee you there's no one on this board who believes anything like that about the children of Briggs. No decision has been made. In fact, the board hasn't even had a proposal placed in front of it regarding what to do with pathways. We know that it's being discussed at the administrative level, but it hasn't come to one of our committees. It hasn't been reviewed by us. No decisions have been made there. And again, if the students have been told that that's the case, they have been misled. So I just wanted to make very clear that we're supportive of the children of Briggs at Pathways Academy. I'm sure the board is going to want to do the best that it can for those students, and we completely repudiate any comments like that that anybody else may have made, and we would not support any such statements. Just want to make that clarification. Yeah. Shirley?
Mike, I think it was probably generated from a meeting last week, because I did attend one. And I think that's probably why the children came out. I believe Norwalk High School had a meeting. The School Governors Council, I believe, had a meeting, and some of those kids, I did recognize them, were at that meeting. So maybe that's where it generated from, and they're coming in to address what was said at that meeting.
I think you may be right.
And I agree. Like I said, I personally, like I said, I don't, those kids are just like every other kid in school. That, to be honest, they are our children in the school. The simple fact is that they like a smaller learning environment, and that's it. So there's no difference of those kids from any of our kids in the school system.
And I think, we did receive an email from the School Governance Council at Norwalk High School, which did have some unfortunate language in it, and I was bothered by it. It described, for Norwalk High School, this would mean re-accepting 50 students who were placed at Briggs Pathways for very specific reasons such as truancy, pregnancy, behavioral issues, the inability to function in a large school, difficult family situations, and the Juvenile Review Board. I think those comments are very offensive. They certainly were not made by Mr. Costanzo when he attended the meeting, and they certainly don't represent the thinking of anybody on this board. Anything else? No. All right. Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn. Our normal adjourn people are not here. Mike?
Yes.
Second. From Heidi. All in favor? Aye.